Hey, today we're going to take a deep dive look into how you can make your own short story booklets to sell at vendor and craft sales. Hey, my name is Tanya and welcome to my writing round. If you haven't been here before, well, we talk about a lot of shit. In this video, we're going to go over how to make a booklet. This is going to include how to format your document on Microsoft Word for the booklet printout. Now, if you don't use Microsoft Word, that's okay. This could also give you some ideas on how to set up your margins and how to format the actual bookfold format so that you can use other software as well. Then we're going to take your book ISBN number and we're going to look at how to get a barcode that you can put on the back of your booklet cover. That makes it look a lot more official. Then we'll talk about how to print your booklet, the interior of the booklet, and which printer works best to do this. Then we're going to look at the cover and talk about the type of paper and the printer and the ink that you need to use. From there, we'll get into how to fold the interior of the booklet, how to fold the cover, how to put it all together, and how to use a saddle stitch stapler to put it all together. Now, before we get into all of that, let's talk about one important thing. Why should you make a short story booklet in your very own home instead of going to an actual print company? Well, there's a couple of things to consider. If you're like me and you want to get a local vendor or craft sale to start getting some local readership, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. In most cases, these sales are based on handmade items. So if you go with the print run, you cannot advertise your books as handmade. It might deter your sales, it might not, but from my perspective, if you are going to a vendor or craft market, it should be made by you. But if you're going to like a specific author fair or you're setting up a table at a bookstore, it's going to be a little bit different. People are going to expect a professional looking book, a book that has been printed by a proper printing company. Now, that's not to say that you can't make your homemade booklet look professional, because you can. The other thing about printing at home versus printing at a printing company that you need to consider. Number one, you don't know how the booklet sales are going to go in your area. So it's helpful to start small and start with a small print run that you've done at home to see how the sales will go. Now, doing booklet printing at home is very time consuming. And yes, there is a bit of a cost to it, but if you're only going to be printing like 20 copies of this and 20 copies of that to see which one sells the best, you don't really need to invest in a large print run. Now, the other benefit of doing it yourself is you can make more per book. Print runs cost more money than printing it at home. And also you get a price break. So you need to order in larger volumes of booklets to be able to get a decent price so that you can make a decent profit per booklet. So again, if you're going to this huge event and you're going to have an official author table, by all means, go through a printing company to do this because it's going to save you a ton of work. But again, you need to be able to afford to pay for that big print run. All right, enough about that. Let's dive into Microsoft Word and take a look at how to format your booklet. All right, so now we're in a Word document. This is called Life Beats. This is a short story and poetry collection, and it's all nonfiction. Now, this is what I had previously formatted for my ebook. Let's take a look at how to change your formatting so it will work for your printout version. The very first thing that we need to do is change the print layout so that it is in a bookfold format. So if we go to Layout and Page Setup, this little window comes up. Now we want to change this Pages to Bookfold. Now this is important. If you're printing it on your printer at home, most cases people are probably going to want to see it in a letter size format because you are going to fold each of those sheets in half, which makes a decent size booklet. You don't want to do something too massive, but you don't need to make it a little mini one with those tiny little A5 sheets or whatever they're called. But when you change this to bookfold, it is automatically going to change your paper size. So let's first go to paper and change this to letter. This is important. So we have it on letter. Now let's go back to our margins. There's a few things that keep in mind. Your top margin is going to be the top section that shows the top of your sheet. You don't need it to be this big. I normally go with about 1 to 1.25 centimeters. Same with the bottom. We kind of want the bottom to be the same. Now we're going to need to leave room for our page numbers. The inside margin is going to be the inside section or the fold section of your booklet, but the gutter is what's right inside the crack. So I recommend that your gutter be no smaller than 0.5 centimeters, but 1 centimeter is probably better. This is going to affect how many pages it takes to print your booklet. There's some things that you need to keep in mind with how you set your margins. The bookfold format in Word is going to be 4 of your story pages is going to equal 1 sheet of paper, because there's going to be a half-size sheet on each side, and we're going to double side it, so when it flips over you have 2 more pages on the 1 sheet. So your pages in total need to be a multiple of 4. And your gutter size and your inside margin, all of your margins are going to affect how many sheets of paper you consume. Now recently I did do a printout and I found that the 1 centimeter margin was a little bit bigger than I actually needed, because you already have the inside margin as well. Now your gutter size is a little bit important, and not everybody takes this into consideration when they're formatting for a print book. Because if you put your thumb in the middle of a fold, it can block or cover the words of your story. So if you don't have this gutter size set correctly, people might get a little annoyed that whenever they put their thumb space in the middle of the fold, it covers the words that they are trying to read. For this one, I'm going to go with a 0.5 centimeters. Of course, let's set the outside the same. Now, of course, after you're done all of your formatting, you're also going to go in and print out a copy and test it. Don't do a big print run until you are sure that all of your margins and everything is set up correctly the way you want it. All right, so let's just double check. We've got top, bottom, inside, outside, and gutter set. We have bookfold. I don't touch this. I mean, it does automatically select the landscape, but it's a special formatting, so you don't actually have to click on either of these. As long as you have the bookfold set, it will print properly. Click OK. All right, so I went from 40 pages to 38 pages, but we've got a lot more to do here. We want our title page to look correct, and we got to decide whether or not we need a table of contents. In the other booklets I did not include a table of contents, but I also had a list of all of the books in that series, and I also had introduction and a title page. When I'm printing these booklets, I actually prefer to not have a table of contents. It's just a personal preference. Like, I know a lot of people do like having a table of contents, but it's pretty lengthy. The other side of making a table of contents is the fact that you would actually have to put in page numbers. Now, most of these are poems or short stories and do not actually take many pages to read, so I find it's kind of pointless for myself to have a table of contents. So I am just going to completely remove that. Let's start with the big stuff. The stuff that is going to impact how many pages you have. And again, if you don't fill up the sheets in multiples of 4, Word is going to add blank sheets. Now, I haven't tried that myself, so I'm pretty sure it's going to go at the end of your book, but I don't see a need of having a blank page. I would rather fill it with some sort of information. Otherwise, you're just wasting the space. So let's insert page numbers. Now, we'll talk a bit more about page numbers near the end, but the page numbers are going to impact how many sheets of paper, or how many pages you have that will go on the sheets of paper. So we're going to go to Insert, Page Numbers, bottom of the page. I like putting it at the center. You can decide where you feel is best. But when I'm doing multiple booklets, I kind of want to keep the page numbers in the same place. Now, let's also select here under header and footer, different first page, so that automatically this page number comes off. Now, we're going to do some more with this, but for now we're going to leave it as is and we'll come back to it. So close the header. As you can see, I have this navigation panel open. Now, what this navigation panel does is each of these titles is in a heading format so that it will come up as a link on the left-hand side. So if you don't have your navigation panel up, you go to View and select Navigation Panel. That allows you to jump around in your story a little bit more. It allows you to move things in different orders. It's kind of like using Scrivener in some way. So doing the print format, I recommend using an easy to read format, whether it be Times New Roman or Calibri or something. You can get a little funky with it, but I don't recommend getting too funky with it because you don't want it to be difficult to read. So I would say we're going to go with 12. 12 formatting, Times New Roman. Spacing. So let's go here under Home, Paragraph. Indentation. Now a lot of people just go first line and it automatically goes to 1.27, but I find that space is super massive. So let's reduce this to 0.3. Now line spacing, I do exactly 13 or 14. Now this you can play with a little bit. This is the spacing between each line. Now if you have a smaller booklet, I recommend 14, but if you have so many sheets of paper, it's probably best that you stick to about 12, just so that you don't have too many sheets of paper. Now when you're doing a print book, a little booklet, it's better to stick within 20 sheets of paper and don't go over that, because using a saddle stitch stapler has a maximum sheet count of 20 sheets that it can actually staple through. But again, I do not have a ton of sheets in this, so we're going to go ahead and play with it and use exactly 14. Now I could go paragraph by paragraph and adjust this. However, there is a faster way of doing this, and we'll come back and fix some stuff. So if we go all the way through, Control, Shift, and End, it's going to select the entire book, including the titles, but we can go back and fix this after by easily clicking on each one. So let's go to Times New Roman, 12-point font, paragraph, first line, 0.3, line spacing exactly 14 points. Okay, now it's shrunk things up even a little bit more. But again, we're going to go sheet by sheet and we're going to play with the formatting even more. So let's go back to the very first page by hitting Control Home, and we're going to fix up this title page a little bit more. It's a little bit on the plain side and we want it to look a little bit nicer. So one thing I recommend doing, because you can play with this, is you can actually find little free clip art images to add in. So let's pick a clip art item for Life Beats. Free clip art, flowers. We also want to pick black and white. Now we're going to be printing the inside of this booklet on black and white, so we don't need anything too colorful, but we do want something that looks elegant and nice. That kind of looks like a fiery sun. Maybe we'll look at the cover and see what the cover picture looks like. So this is the original ebook cover, and as you can see, these are apple blossoms. So let's go and see if we can find something that resembles apple blossoms. You don't want anything with too much shading. You want something that is a sharp image that's going to stand out, and I will show you why. See, there's a name on here. It doesn't look like I can use this one. This one looks nice. I'm going to download this one. Okay, so there's a couple things you need to know about images. First, we're going to leave some spacing here. We're going to do Insert Picture from this device. Now that's pretty big, but we can change the size and get rid of some extra spacing. All right, now, if you find that when you put in an image that some of it is cut off, which forces you to shrink it down, you can change that by going to Layout and go to the spacing before, and you can adjust this up or down to make sure that it shows the entire image. If that still doesn't work, you could play around with this line up here, the before and after. And all this image does is just kind of fancy up this first title page. Now let's look at the title. Now I do have a preset format. Now it's not showing up here, so I'm going to open a previous format and I'm going to copy and paste it so that it shows up in here. this is what I'm looking for. Copy and paste. Now it's going to stay there. But let's change this to black because we don't need to have it too much. So I have to change it back to powdered donuts. Let's make this a little bit bigger. We'll get rid of this first line because it is the beginning. Now normally when you have the beginning of a chapter, the beginning of the chapter does not normally show right at the top of the page. There's normally a bit of space and sometimes a little image. Now we could find a picture of a donut. Let's see if we can get that. So this is what I'm going to do for all of the chapters. I'm going to make sure the indenting is correct, the spacing is correct. I'm going to put in an image in and change the formatting of the chapter heading. So I'll just put this in fast mode for you so you don't have to sit here and watch me do it all. Okay, now the other thing you can do is a drop caps. To do the drop caps, you highlight the letter, insert drop caps. Don't forget to save often. You also want to check your page breaks. The other thing about doing images is some of them come up with this background. So you want to edit your picture format so that you don't have a background printing. So if you have a background in your picture, what you do is you right click and you select the format picture. This little side window will pop up. You go to your brightness and contrast, which is under the image section. Now I would say I'm going to need to pick this one. See, now the background has lightened so that it won't show a background. Now let's go back to the first one and try it again. Alright, so now I have finished the main aspect of the formatting. But as you can see, we have 33 pages. We can either decrease it by 1 or we can increase it by 3 pages. Now, increasing it by 3 pages seems like a far stretch. So reducing it by 1 page might actually work a little bit better. Now, if you look at this one, we have a lot of extra spacing here because it is a poem, but we might be able to reduce the spacing between lines enough to put it on 1 page. Now let's just play with this. We don't want to squish it too close together. Yeah, that's too much. I don't like the look of that. Okay, so that didn't work the way that I'd planned. Let's see if we have anything else that's kind of overhanging to the next page that doesn't necessarily need to. Like, look at this. This we might be able to reduce. Now the thing is, if I do keep reducing the spacing and all of this to shrink it by one page, it's best to do the entire package so that the spacing balances between all of the stories. So now, because we've already formatted the chapter headings, we don't want to highlight the whole thing and change it. So we're going to have to do one section at a time. And I know that's like a total pain in the butt, but I think it'll be okay. Now don't forget to watch your spacing if you're going to do this. I don't want to add too much extra spacing, but we need it to match in the layout. I think this one we already did, but we're just going to double check that it's at 12. Next one. See, that one made a big difference. Now maybe if I go in here, we could pull this up into the previous one. Did that pull it up? Not quite. Now the ebook format has this extra spacing, so what I could do actually is just, see, that looks a lot better. Now I'm down to 32, which is a multiple of 4. Now I might actually just go back and undo this spacing change, because I don't think I need to now that I've figured out how to reduce that. Back to 14. I know this is a pain in the butt trying to go back and forth, but it will be worth it in the long run. It'll look a lot nicer if you keep the formatting structured the same. Hopefully this doesn't add another page here, but we'll try it. Let's just go back up here. So this one, we might just keep this one formatted slightly different than the rest. Now we know how to do it. So the rest of it should be okay, because the rest of them are at 14 except for the Hockey Mom poem. We're just going to do one more check here. See, this one looks a little bit funny, having one line on a separate page. We could play with the spacing here to pull it back into 1, but then we're going to run into the same problem again. What we could do is just make this balloon a little bit bigger instead. There we go. And the other thing I didn't mention is making sure that your paragraphs use this full justification. You don't want to have it to the left. It kind of makes everything jagged on the right side. You want it looking nice and clean and blocky like a square. Now that's something that I had done in this document previously, which is why I didn't show you till now. All right, we've got our pages set. Now let's talk about printers.
Now I chose this Brother printer. This Brother printer does duplexing. It also has a scanner and a top loader. Now those two things aren't necessary, but the important part is it is black ink and it double sides. If you're interested in what Brother printer this is, I have left a link below in the description. Now selecting your paper for the interior of the booklet is quite easy. You basically need a standard letter size paper that is a bright white. Now there is normally percentages on there. I don't think the percentages make a huge difference, but you might want to consider looking at like a 97 to 98% brightness.
Now one thing that I didn't mention before is make sure that you save a copy of your document. So I've renamed mine Life Beats Booklet so that I know that this is the booklet version. You don't want to start editing your Word document that you used for your ebook because you might need that to upload it again. Now let's talk about sending it to the printer. We go to File and Print. You might think, hey, I've already formatted it as a book fold, so I don't need to change anything else. Well, guess what? You have to watch for a couple of different things. Now the first thing I'm going to do, make sure I have the right printer selected. Go to the properties and changing my resolution. Now this is what I like about the Brother printer. Here's the model number of the printer as well, but again I'll put it in the description below. I can actually change the resolution. I'm going to go to HQ 1200, which basically is high quality. I think it's important to make your booklet the best quality you possibly can. You don't need to change anything else on here. It's already selected the two-sided booklet fold based on your preference in Word. Now, this is important. Please, please, please pay attention to this part because I have messed up on this in the past. Every time you go to File and Print, this setting here automatically changes back to flip on the long edge. But it's important that you flip on the short edge. Print on both sides, flip pages on the short edge. Now, if you don't select this and you flip it on the long edge, you're going to be flipping on this section, which means the next sheet is going to be upside down when you fold your booklet. Let's not do that. So flip it on the short edge. Now, as long as you keep this screen open while you're printing multiple copies, that won't change. But as soon as you leave it and go back to it, I find it very often changes to the long edge. So check this every time you want to print new copies. Otherwise, you're going to waste your paper and your toner. So let's just print one copy to make sure that everything is formatted the way we want it. Now that I'm looking at this, there's one more thing that I forgot to mention, and that is these page numbers. Now, most commonly in a printout book, you don't want these page numbers showing on the first chapter. Now, there's a lot of videos out there on how to get rid of these multiple page numbers that you don't want to see. I'm going to show you a trick. Now, this is not going to work if you want to send this to an actual printing company, but it is good to use when you are at home doing it by yourself. So we are going to insert a shape, and it is going to be a square. And we're going to draw this little square over top of the 2. Now, as you can tell, it is automatically selecting blue. So let's do the shape fill as white, not no fill. Make sure it's white because it needs to cover the font. And the shape outline should also be white. Now, if I click off, you can see that that page number is now hidden. Now, I know this is kind of like a sneaky way of getting around it. This is not going to work if you send this to a printing company, but it does work when you're printing at home. Now, as I'm looking at this, I think I want to change this and move it down one more, and that looks better. Now, let's get back to the printing process. File, print, and see, it's flipped to the long edge. Ha! Let's switch it back to the short edge. All right, we're good to go. We already changed the printing settings. That won't change. Let's hit print.
And here it comes. So exciting. All right, now let's take it off and take a quick peek. There's the smooshing, there's the page numbers. Now, when this comes off the printer, this package is in exactly the order that it needs to be in. This is the very middle of the book. And if you look underneath, we've got the back of the book and the front of the book. This is exactly the way we want it. Now, before we start looking at folding and packaging, let's look at the cover.
All right, so what I'm using is Corel Paint Shop Pro 2021. Now, this is a copy of my Red Secrets book, but in order to keep the same formatting and the same concept, I am going to save this as a copy, and I'm going to name it Booklet Cover Life Beats. Okay, so this software is not exactly like Photoshop, but it is similar graphic design software. So let's put in the Life Beats cover. So the reason why I'm leaving this Red Secrets there for now is just so that I can line things up and make sure I'm keeping things the same format. I had made a mistake before with the Red River cover, and it didn't line up properly. Now, these covers that I'm using is just the ebook cover. I didn't want to go through the entire process of redesigning a completely new cover, so I'm just using it for the front. Now, it doesn't quite line up the same way. I am going to stretch it out a bit, and if it starts looking a little bit wonky, then I am going to have to redesign the cover. but I really don't think that looks terrible. So let's find the layer with the red secrets cover, and I'm just going to remove it. I don't need it here. Now I think I'm a little bit under the edge here, so let's just stretch it out a little bit there to make sure that there's no blank edge. Alright, so in terms of the sizing, I looked up the sizing of a letter sheet of paper in terms of graphic design sizing. Now all of this is the description for the previous book that I designed. So what I need to do is replace this summary on the back, replace the picture, and get the proper barcode. So let's go over how to get the proper barcode. The first thing I need to do is get my ISBN number. Now we're going to go to a website. This is the barcode generator website. Now this is absolutely free. Now the important thing to do first, because again I have messed up on this before, so trust me, you want to get the EAN barcode font EAN 13 before you put your barcode in here. So now I'm going to grab my ISBN number and I'm going to paste it in here. Now you're probably going to get a little error. See? You need to get rid of all the dashes. So let's get rid of all of the dashes and hit refresh. And voila, there's the barcode for the back of the book. I will post this link in the description below. So we're going to download this. We're going to go back to our cover, go to my download, and drop this into the graphic design software. Now first I'm going to go in and get rid of the old barcode. Zooming in, delete, take the barcode, copy it, and paste. Now of course it's going to paste it in the middle of the sheet, so I've got to go find it. And here we go. And there it is. So now we've got to change some fonts here. Now this can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Okay, now in terms of pricing, because of the time and the cost to put this all together, I'm going to keep every booklet at $5 each, regardless of how thick or thin it is. So now I need to grab this number again, and I'm just going to actually type it in, because you can't really easily copy and paste here. So 9781. Alright, so now make sure, this is another thing that's important, make sure that your ISBN number is matching the barcode number showing below. So now I need to edit the description. So let's just double check this. There are moments in life that we treasure and will never forget. They make us giggle or cry or simply smile. With a mixture of short memories and poetry, Life Beats documents Tanya's unforgettable moments or memories and thoughts. May they stir some emotion for you as well. All right, let's talk about paper and printers, and then we're going to print it.
In terms of printing out your cover, now you want to use a nice thick cardstock. Now I've chosen to use this Canon. Now funny story, I actually went shopping for a brand new printer and I purchased a brand new Canon inkjet printer. However, when I got it home, I found out it was worse quality than the one I already owned. Now when I first bought this printer years ago, I had no idea that it was one of the best quality Canon printers you can actually get for color and photo design. I'm just going to turn this on. It has a very great interactive screen. Now the ink refills can get costly, but if you're printing a whole bunch of covers out in any given time, then you shouldn't have to worry too much about the ink drying up. Now my ink's good, nothing's running out. I just wanted to double check. I can check that on my computer as well. And we're going to make sure we have some cardstock in here. Just make sure it's lined up properly. Put in an extra sheet just to be safe. Make sure it's open. And voila. Now let's look at the printer setting on the computer to make sure that we're picking the best possible quality. Alright, so now that we got our printer set up, we got the cardstock in, we've checked our ink levels, let's just go ahead and print. So originally I thought maybe I could do the cover design in Microsoft Word and get it to print properly, but I just feel like using the actual graphic design software itself is a lot better. It makes more sense. Change it to landscape, change the printer to the Canon MG5400 because it's awesome. Now the properties. Now this is probably already set from the last time. Now I'm using cardstock. I don't recommend using gloss. Now I haven't tried it myself, but I have been told that using a gloss paper sucks in a lot more ink and you're going to spend a ton of extra money on your ink. And again, the purpose for doing this yourself at home is so that it's cost effective and so that you can actually do it yourself so you're not spending a ton of money on a print run. So let's keep our costs down, stick to a standard cardstock matte finish. 8.5 by 11 paper. Okay, so when you check your settings on the Canon, we want to make sure we select plain paper. I have tried other things like photo paper and everything else and other papers, but it does not work as well. Now, also the print quality should be high because we want to make it as professional looking as possible. Everything's ready to go, so let's hit print. Landscape, 1 copy. Make sure you only print 1 copy initially because we want to make sure that all the borders are lined up. Now, one thing to note, you're going to notice on the printout copy that although we've got it fit to sheet, there's automatically going to be a margin, like a bleed line, I believe that people call this. So we're going to hit print. And let's go check out the printing process. Now, as you can see, this is going to take a little bit longer than when it prints out of the Brother, the black and white, because it does take a lot longer to have the colored printer print it. Now look how great this looks. Like the quality, you're not going to get that with other colored printers. The color is vibrant, it's very detailed. We've picked our best possible quality that we can get. I'm very happy with this. Now, I know it looks dull in this lighting, but it's only because of the lighting that I'm using right now. But it does look a lot better. So once we get over to the table and get things folded, then you'll see the difference. See you in a minute. Okay, let's sit down and talk about what kind of tools you need. The first thing, and one of the most important things, is to get yourself a saddle stitch stapler. I got this from Amazon. I believe it was around $60-ish. I can't recall if that was US or Canadian. Now this does up to 20 sheets. I've been successful as going as far as 22 sheets plus the cover. However, I recommend trying to stick 20 or less because it does kind of make the book look a little bit larger than it needs to be. Now, optional tools. Binder clips do help if you are very picky about keeping your booklet, flat, together, perfect before you do the stapling. Personally, I tried it and it was too much extra time, and my time is very valuable to me, as I'm sure it is to you. But there are ways of lining things up as close as possible. Now, your audience is going to be forgiving, of course, because you are advertising it as a handmade booklet. Now, the other thing you need, at the very least, make sure you have yourself a ruler. I like using this small one because it's easy to handle and it's not too big. Now you can use a bigger ruler. Mine is a little bit flexible. I think it would have been better if I had gotten a more solid ruler. But for now, this is what I have. And the important thing to me also was to not spend a lot of extra money and just to use what I have. So let's take a look at the cover and the folding. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my cover. Now, keep in mind with your cardstock that it would be quite easy to break or split it, and you don't want to make the crease on the fold line until you are absolutely positive it is lined up. Now, this is where your ruler can help. Now, I have tried other tools, but I found what I had didn't work, where you can have something that has like a perfect 90-degree corner, so you could just kind of push it into that corner and then fold it without having to worry as much. But I found, again, the one that I had did not work. So it's something I'm still kind of looking into. But the important thing is to make sure that your corners are lined up perfectly. I mean, you could just use your fingers and line it up as well. Sometimes I find with the cover it's a little bit harder to use the straight edge. So fold it the middle first and slowly press it down across. Now you want to grab your ruler and run it without scratching the picture. Run it along the edge to make sure that the crease becomes like a permanent fold and shows less of those crinkly marks into the cardstock. So I think that turned out pretty good. Now you can see that there is, the outside border. And again, that's due to printing on the paper. It automatically adds that border, which is kind of like the bleed line, I believe it's called, but I actually kind of like it with the border. And if you put some other booklets beside it, it looks pretty sharp when all of your booklets are the same type of format and they all have the border around it. Okay, so let's set this aside and let's look at folding this. So it came off the printer like this. This is the outside and this is the inside, is the easiest way to look at it. So what I recommend doing is set the pile aside and grab the inside sheet first. Grab your ruler and just line up the corners. I'm sorry if my hands get a little bit shaky. That's part of my health condition. There's not much I can do about that. Now again, I'm not worried about it being too perfect, but if the overhang is too much, it's going to look really stupid once you put your book together and if the edges are sticking out too far. And again, we want to use your ruler to make sure that your flat edge, your folded edge is perfectly straight and permanently folded. It's the easiest way to explain it. Now I put it in the side. After each sheet, I put it on top. Now I'm going to go in fast mo. All right, so now to put it together, because we folded it from the inside out, we can just grab from the top, open, slide it in. Bang it on the table to make sure everything lines up as close as possible. And don't worry if this kind of expands a bit, because once you put the staple in and you put the pressure on it, it'll pull everything together. And we'll slide it inside the cover. Now the other thing is, you're going to see it stick out a little bit. If you're super picky, you could grab like a paper cutter and trim the edges of the sheets before you put it inside the booklet. Now I tried it once and I didn't like it, mainly because this paper cutter is a little bit old and dull. And so the edge wasn't sharp enough to cut the paper the way I wanted. I was being a little bit picky. So I don't trim my pages. I don't care if there's too much, if there's a tiny bit of an overhang outside the booklet. because again, I'm advertising these as homemade. So they will forgive you, understanding that it is a handmade booklet. It is not going to be 100% perfect. Okay, let's line up for the stapler. All right. So again, you could at this point line it up perfectly the way you want it. Take your binder clips and clip it around your booklet so nothing moves when you staple it. However, I don't care about that as much because again, it's a handmade booklet. It's not going to be perfect and it takes too long. So the important part is to make sure that your fold lines up on the inside in here. So I'm going to hold it together till I put it on here. Now, as you can see, there's this edge here. If I push down on it, it will also help me make sure that all of the folds are grouped together and squished together nicely. Now, I start with an eyeball. I have a couple of tips though. I found some issues with using this without, eyeballing it. First, I want to line up the part where the staple sticks out directly on the fold. Otherwise, you can have the staple go in slightly before or after the fold, or to the left or the right side. So do the middle one first, so nothing slides. Make sure it's lined up. Now you can't just put a little bit of pressure on. You kind of have to push on it hard to make sure that it goes through all of the paper properly. Voila, there's our first staple. Now everything is going to line up properly. You're not going to be sliding up and down. Now it could slide a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much. So then I do about 5 staples. So again, you want to push it down and push it back and forth and balance it so that it's squished together properly and that your folds don't misalign. And again, make sure that your whole line is on the fold. And voila. Now the more sheets of paper that you use, the more pressure you're going to have to push. I mean, don't just hammer it, but you do have to put quite a bit of pressure on it. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of a running start, if you know what I mean. Oh, this isn't quite lined up properly. Now, sometimes it doesn't line up directly where you want it. If you move the staple so that it's a little bit towards you and then kind of turn it a bit, it's hard to explain it, but you can kind of feel the staple where it runs along the bend of the stapler, and you can kind of play with it until you're able to get the holes the holes lined up on the bind of the book or the fold of the book. Now, sometimes I do find that these staples do bend a little bit. I think every second or every third book, I tend to have one staple that bends. It bends while I'm stapling, and that's okay. So when that happens, I'm picky and I do want to make it the best quality I can. So if I ever have to take out a staple, I use my ruler and I bend these little prongs up first. And then I pull it out from the back. Now you can, of course, get a staple remover, but I don't have one. Okay, so everything looks good. It's lined up. Again, if anything kind of gets off of the fold, if any of the staples don't go directly on the fold line and they kind of go off kilter a bit, it does affect how your pages turn. So if you want to get your pages to turn properly, then you need to make sure it's right on your fold line. Okay, so now I want to explain the whole gutter thing. Now, let's just get one page with lots of words on it. All right, now say you have your page and somebody's holding the book. If you put your thumb in here and you don't have the gutter and the inside margin sized properly, they're going to be covering up the paper. Now, a lot of books, or you're going to be covering up the words. Now, a lot of books that does happen because people just don't really think about that, or maybe they're trying to conserve paper, or maybe printing companies don't have that much of an issue because they're on a perfect bind system. So there's less, curve to the fold. Anyways, I know what I'm saying. I don't know if it's making sense to you. So that's why we want to make sure we have the right border. Okay, so now that it's printed, it's packaged, check everything. Check, your layout. Check out your Your margins, make sure everything makes sense. Okay. Check all your pictures. If your pictures are too dark in the background or not sharp enough, you might want to swap out your picture if you have any pictures in your story. And also you want to make sure that you change your brightness in the Word settings or in the picture settings in Word. Make sure that your drop caps look good the way you like it. Make sure that you have enough spacing above your title. Just basically check everything, and also double check this because I had to end up printing off labels. Double check that your ISBN number matches the actual barcode number. If something happens and you've accidentally printed a bunch, like I did, without the proper barcode, you can go back in and print off the proper barcode off of a sticky label and stick it on top of here. Okay, so now this is not going to stay closed unless you actually press it. Now you can get something called a book press, but for me, I use an actual weight because that's what I have. So here is my weight. This is actually my husband's weight, but you know. Now, yes, I'm borrowing Twilight. Now, I'm not going to put this weight directly on this book, directly on the book, because I don't want any dust or dirt or anything to get on it. So I'm using Twilight. No, I haven't read it yet, but I've watched the movies. Now, when you're putting something on top of here, I normally do like a whole stack. Let me just show you what I mean. I normally do all of these, print a whole bunch, and get like a stack of 5 on this side, a stack of 5 on that side, turn the bind, or the fold section, the bind, directly inside to each other. Put the book or flat, hard surface directly on the middle, and put the weight on top of the book in the middle. And what this will do is it'll compress the bind, and it will make sure that the book stays together. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get situations where it just stays up and open. So don't forget, put some comments below. Let me know what you think of this process. And that's it. Well, I hope this video has been helpful for you and has taught you how to make your own booklet. If I've missed anything or if you have any questions, again, please just leave a comment below and I am happy to answer and try to help as much as I can. And if I don't know, I will try to help you find that information. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever. And happy booklet making.